Hi, my name is Brandi Slone, and my grant was titled Making Sense of Math, Hands-on Math in a Hands-Off World. So I'm a teacher at Dove Allen Central Elementary in Floyd County, and over the past year I have been refining and focusing on my math instruction. During this time, my biggest concern and focus has been working towards keeping the love of math alive in my students, especially as they progress through the primary and elementary grade levels. So what I noticed last year, towards the end of winter 2020, as I observed more intermediate classes, I started to see that as they got older, even the students that I had once had in primary who loved math, I observed them in their intermediate classes and I saw that the love of math was dead. So I thought to myself, what changed? And so my action research was just looking at the impacts of using manipulatives. And from what I could observe between our primary classes and our intermediate classes in math instruction was that students weren't using manipulatives as much. It just became a focus on technology. So when I started this grant back in fall of 2020, I had saw all this research here that supported the use of manipulatives for math instruction and all the benefits that there were to using them. So I continued to think to myself, why do primary classrooms have high use of manipulatives? And why do intermediate classrooms seem to have no use of manipulatives? They kind of are technology focused and they're using abstract examples. In primary, we're using more concrete examples and we still have technology integration. It's not just the focus though. So as we moved into a virtual learning platform for our school year 2020 into 2021, my concern was going to be that my math instruction would look more like these intermediate classrooms, that we would have no manipulatives, everything would be abstract and technology focused. And from my research, I knew that that would not be ideal for my students. So my problem was, how do I keep math hands-on during a pandemic? So my thoughts were that my first graders loved math and I didn't want it to haunt me that they would not like math this year, especially being virtual for the majority of the year. So I knew manipulatives is where I needed to go and I needed to find funding for those manipulatives. My hypothesis was that if my project was successful, focusing on manipulatives for math instruction, whether virtual or in person, then my students' love for math and learning would continue whether they were at home or in person. So what I did was I created manipulative bags for each student within first grade. Within these bags, I enclosed manipulatives that could be used for all kinds of mathematical standards within our first grade instruction. I also created interactive games that would allow them to be hands-on too while still practicing their content. These items in the bags included place value blocks, dice, geometric shapes, counters, blank laminated graphic organizers, rulers, connecting cubes, clocks, markers, marker boards, and then the erasers too. My last few items that were listed on my project were used for STEM purposes, which allowed me to utilize low-tech STEM in addition to higher-tech STEM that I utilized within my lessons. So these things that I purchased were circuit lights and motor kits, and those were going to allow me to make game boards with students. One particular game that we are going to create will be a self-checking, like addition and subtraction fluency game board that we'll make with those motor kits and light circuits. So here's just the pictures. We also had Play-Doh on there. We're using that a lot for shapes and partitioning shapes. We have the place value blocks, there's the clocks, the marker board kits, the connecting cubes, and we have tangram pieces on there as well, because that's a big component to the first grade standards. So the use of materials was the individual bags, And this allowed me to limit the amount of touching contact between students. It allowed me to have the students utilize the bags whether they were home or in person. So even right now that Floyd County is back to the in-person learning, I still have roughly 11 or 12 students who are complete virtual learners. So while they join our lessons in our hybrid model, they can still interact with us just as we are in the classroom because they have those hands-on materials at home as well. The paddle boards and the marker boards made the biggest difference for our engagement, especially when we were all virtual. And it helps with engagement in the classroom too, especially that students can keep these materials in their desk. There's not a lot of transition time. I just saw a big improvement since we have got these materials. So here are some pictures. You can see that we're using the paddle boards. Clean Slate, which is the brand of the paddle boards, has allowed us to download templates. And so that is a clock template where they could write the time. We have another student here using those connecting cubes for measurement. We also use those connecting cubes for counting and things like that when we were virtual. So my plan of action looked like this on a timeline. Around November, I got to submit and finalize my order for materials. I got my materials right before we went on Christmas break. And so from December to January and February, I just kind of organized those materials, thought about how I wanted to distribute them to students. I had to be intentional in that because I couldn't pass out everything at once. I felt like they would get lost or misused. So what I had to do was plan out my instruction by the month and know what I was going to teach in that month, what materials they needed within that month, and plan the bag that way. I had to do it by the month because we have such a large percentage of students who are raised by grandparents or lack transportation, and so I couldn't expect the students to come once a week to pick up a bag. It had to be by the month to allow them to find transportation. So I implemented these materials daily within our math lessons, assessments, and questioning. So daily, these students were referring to these materials in their bag. We came back to a hybrid model in March, early March, and during that time, I continued to collect and analyze data from prior use of materials until now, post materials, and I started looking at engagement and our summative and formative assessment results, how they were impacted. Here's some more pictures of my students at home. You see the marker boards are being used. You see his materials are laid out on the table. We have a student using measurement on one of her virtual learning days with the cubes. And then you see the same student, you see his connecting cubes laid out there and things like that. So I evaluated this project by looking at how the manipulatives and the technology combine for at-home learning and learning within the classroom. I was comparing the beginning of the year where we had no materials to now where we have the material usage. I administered surveys to parents about math learning before handing out the materials. So this was a Google form sent out to all parents, and I just asked them how they felt about instruction, how their student felt about instruction, how they felt about the instruction last year, how their student felt about the instruction last year. Just kind of getting some ideas about how they felt when they were in person, how they feel now, what could I do better, and I actually asked the question, which we'll see, do you think your child would learn better if they have manipulatives? So for in-person learning, I plan to alternate the lessons between manipulatives only, technology only, and then a combination of the two, comparing the exit tickets and the formative assessment from those lessons. And at the end, so about a month ago, I administered surveys to parents about math learning before handing out materials, and then they conducted another survey after lessons to see how they felt and how their opinions may or may not have changed. So here was the fall before we got materials. You see it says, how did your child feel about math instruction and instruction last school year? And you see that most liked them. We have very good, good, and fair. And that, that fair could be from the impact of the NTI starting in March. We don't know. So the children overall liked the math instruction last year. They said excellent, very good, good, fair. Only a few said poor. So does your child enjoy math? This was winter. This was after the materials. And so overall, we had 100% from the 13 parents who could finish the survey. 13% said yes, they enjoyed instruction. So this was parent survey fall before the materials. It says, how do you feel about the math instruction your child has received this school year? So this was in the fall. This was about a month or two after the school year began. And you see that there was a good percentage that said good and very good and excellent. And then there were some that said poor. So they still had positive outlooks on the instruction for the school year before materials. After materials, this is after as a parent, do you think the materials improved learning for your child? And 100% of them said yes. So the parents and the students enjoyed math after material usage, and they felt like the materials helped. Before our materials, parents said that they thought students would enjoy math more with the materials. Some said maybe, some said no, but overall, 82% of the parents who took this survey felt like the materials would help their student enjoy math more. And then this was after the materials were handed out. Does your child enjoy math more when they have materials? 100% said yes. Before our materials, as a parent, I asked them, do you think it would help your child learn our math concepts better if they had hands-on manipulatives? You see that from the 17 parents, 82% said yes, 17% said maybe. There was no parent that said no, they didn't think the materials would help. And then after the materials, I asked them again, do you think the materials have improved learning for your child? 100% said yes. Does your child feel that the materials help them? 100% yes. So I compared and contrasted assessments next after I collected the opinions, pre-materials and post-materials, and I knew that was favorable. Everyone agreed that they felt like it helped them. But what I needed more was concrete evidence. Did it help them? So I looked at assessments before materials and assessments after materials. Prior to the materials, we see virtual formative assessment average of students in attendance. So I looked at the students who were solely in attendance of our live lessons before materials. Our assessment average was 72%. After materials, still looking at those students who are only in attendance of our live lessons, you see it jumped up to 91%. That's a big improvement. Our virtual summative assessment average of students in attendance of a live lesson. So up top was the formative assessments, the daily assessments that I would give at the end of my lessons. It went from 72 to 91. So then I started looking at my unit assessments, my summative assessments that we would take towards the end of the week. And I solely looked at students who were in live attendance because that was the students who were being guided through using these manipulatives in the correct way. And the majority of those students who were on my live lessons were the same students who actually picked up their bags. I did have some students who, for whatever reason, were unable to pick up their bags. But from these students, you see that before materials, we had 78% mastery. After materials, we had 90% mastery. So this is from my ViewSonic board at school. At this time, we were a hybrid model. So you see I have some students within my classroom, some students at home. But this is a Padlet, and I had them formulate a time. You can see that some are incorrect in this picture, but we worked through that. But you can see a lot of them are really happy to have these clocks, whether they're at home or in school. And that made a big difference with healing time. Here is our tangrams that we had purchased through the grant. This was for the composing shape standard within first grade. They really enjoyed using those hands-on too. And so from my conclusions and observations, I saw that students enjoy math more with hands-on materials. material lead to an increase in virtual lesson engagement. And from talking with a lot of my colleagues, they wish they would have had the opportunity to have the grant like this so they could have had their lessons more hands-on too. I got wonderful praise from my administrators with my virtual lessons because of the hands-on component as well. Students and parents are more confident in math instruction with hands-on materials. I think too, once I showed parents that I was willing to put in the work and help them get these materials, they were also willing to have them there and present for my virtual instruction more, because I think having the materials made them more confident that the instruction would be worthwhile and they needed to be there for that. So now I'm just going to communicate the results and assessments to my administrators to try to influence them to use materials more, manipulatives more, and to help us find the funding to purchase it for all classrooms in my school. So I'm very appreciative to KVEC, all their partners, and Duff Allen Central Elementary, because they have been so supportive for this grant and allowing me to get these materials, and it has made a huge impact.